Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to lay a strong foundation for health and happiness in our teenage girls. So today's interview is with Jodie Nolan. Jodie has been called one of Australia's most admired and respected financial advisors. She is passionate about teaching people about money, the core fundamentals that should be taught in our schools but aren't. Jodie is making a real difference in not only adult financial education, but more importantly for our next generation to give them the best financial start that they can have. Thank you so much for being with us, Jodie.
Oh, thanks, Edwina. It's my privilege.
I love your story and how you got to where you are now. So can we start with you sharing that?
Yeah, for sure. A little bit about me. So I'm in my early 40s now. I've got a master's degree in applied finance, which is one of the highest degrees you can get in Australia around money. I've got 20 years plus experience with runs on the board with being, number one in the country for one of the big four banks as a financial advisor. But it's not always been about money for me. I started out when I left school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I actually had no clue. And maths was never really my strong point, ironically, in year 11 and 12, although I did study it. And my mum was a lawyer, and I just assumed that I should move into law. So I went to work for a law firm for about 18 months. And while I was there, I'd started to study law, and I hated it. So while I was working for this law firm in Brisbane, I used to see a whole heap of snappy looking, savvy people who would go to lunch near where I worked. And I was always fascinated by them because they seemed to have long lunches and they seemed to drive nice cars. And I was always like, wonder what they do. And I found out that they were financial advisors. And I ended up being offered a job to work with them. And so then I went to work with them basically. And so at around about 18, 19, I suddenly had this incredible group of like-minded, motivated, really powerful type mentors in my world who basically said the sky's the limit. You can be anything that you want to be. So then I went from studying law and being in an environment I hated to studying global economics and the financial situation and realizing how powerful this information was and being surrounded by mentors who wanted to see me do well. And that's sort of where it all started for me.
Gosh, what a dream. What a dream. If I could wave a magic wand for my girls and have that kind of experience arrive, that is amazing.
It resonated. I think, the teachers show up when the student's ready. I was really disillusioned with the whole law environment. It didn't feel right. Admittedly, the attraction of seeing these people who seem to have their life together was amazing. And it was, I was really ready to do that. So, and then that's when I've moved into the financial side of things and I've never looked back.
Yeah. It's I love sharing stories of how what happened at school is not necessarily what reflects what happens later. I couldn't do any sciences. I couldn't do any maths when I was at school. None of it made sense. And then I went and studied applied science to do naturopathy, and it all made perfect sense. It's just when it's applied to something that you're interested in, then suddenly, your brain wakes up and takes it in. I think it's
Well, and all of a sudden I had people who were explaining the fundamentals in a better way. So that instead of just being at school where I was doing, formulas and algebra, which I had no clue how you would physically apply that in the real world. When I went into that environment where people were saying, well, this is how you get percentages, this is how you, work back your calculations, and this is why we get to the beta of something, I started to really appreciate all of that. And how that the more I learned, the more I was able to think critically, and the more I thought for myself and was able to evaluate, the better decisions I made. And that reflected everywhere in my world, not just my work, but also it made me knowledgeable, like wanting the thirst for more knowledge, which has never left. I sit there on the weekends and research all sorts of weird things just because I like the idea of learning more and understanding more.
Yeah. And, I know that another part of your story was that having this background and learning about how to manage money didn't necessarily save you from things going absolutely pear-shaped, but what it has done is allowed you to rebuild your life again as a young mum, which is quite amazing. Can you share a little bit of that story with our audience?
Yeah, for sure. So it's no secret. I spent my 20s working really hard, making lots of money, like tens of millions of dollars, being self-made. My husband and I had a beautiful big home, marble and glass, all that stuff, investment properties, commercial properties, share investments, all of the good stuff that goes with working hard and building assets. And then in GFC, 2008 hit, and I was in hospital having my daughter, and all of our investments were sold down through and unbeknownst to me at the time. And so what ensued after 2008, and I wasn't the only one, the whole world experienced it. But from a personal point of view, I lost my career at the time. I had a brand new baby. She was 6 weeks old when all of this started to really unravel. So that affected, your headspace, your mindset. But it wasn't just me losing wealth. It was the impact it had on my family and friends. And it was dark, really, really dark time. So, and then I fell pregnant with my son straight away. So I was then pregnant and had a tiny little baby, dealing with financial ruin, dealing with ASIC and all of the stuff that goes with being involved in one of Australia's biggest corporate collapses. So I think looking back now, it's been 10 years. I didn't realize I would have the strength and the resilience to move through that. And now I think I appreciate more than ever that I've been able to build my wealth once. Yes, I've lost it through how I feel, no fault of my own. But these things are sent to test us, and I've had to build it back again. So I know very clearly how dark it can get, and how there can feel like there's no hope. And what you need to do then to step yourself through it to then come out the other side. And there are some days, admittedly, that are just, even now, that I think, oh, what, this isn't fair. What, I would have been here by now. But I also have 2 perfectly healthy little babies, and life has since been throwing challenges at me, and it's shaping who I am. And I think that makes me a better financial advisor. Yeah. I'm a little bit more risk adverse. It makes me more knowledgeable. When someone's sitting in front of me and they're about to lose their house or their business, or they've gone through divorce or they've gone through bankruptcy, sometimes I do sit and cry with them, because I know how heartbreaking it is. Yeah. And I know that the journey they're on, and I can help them better because I've had to do it myself. Yeah. And I think there's nothing more profound than learning by experience.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I hear in that whole story, Jodie, is that your children get to watch how you do this, and what a phenomenal role model you are for them in, showing them that, not necessarily, we all want to show our kids what life looks like when it's all sorted and it's all perfect. But I think the power actually comes from them watching us grow and, continue to build.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. I think for me, I wanted, especially in your environment, the health and wellness world, I wanted the calm birthing courses, I wanted all the beautiful organic foods, and I'd set myself up so that I didn't have to go back to work. I'd officially retired so that I could just concentrate on being a mum. And all of that went pear-shaped, and so my children were born into this environment that wasn't ideal. Yeah. What I've done since then is really appreciate the fact that I don't want them to have that scarcity mindset. Yeah. I don't want them to have all of the negative connotations that come around wealth and money and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm very mindful of raising them to be really independent and have the tools or the wherewithal, hopefully, to be able to have a challenge and find a way around it or through it.
Yeah. Empowering our kids. That's what this is all about. All right. So now let's get to the good stuff, the juicy stuff. Hello, and welcome to this
not
interview
everybody
in the
thinks
series
about,
that is
being
all about
financially
empowering a league of
responsible is the juicy
extraordinary
stuff, but I know
mothers
you do.
on how to
So
lay a strong
I'm going to
foundation
draw
for health
on
and
your
happiness
enthusiasm
in our
around all this.
teenage girls.
How do we
Today's
make a
interview
start?
is with
Our
Jacqueline
teenage
Way.
girls.
Jacqueline has dedicated herself.
A lot of them are just starting
to
in their
social
first
good
jobs
projects,
at
both
local
personally and
junk food
professionally,
restaurants
for over 2 decades,
which
raising
might have done.
millions of
And
dollars for organizations
they've got this bit of money
globally.
coming in, and I'm watching every time they get $1, they spend $1.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of trying to give them ideas around maybe just, think about a percentage that you can put aside and you don't touch, and you can use that to, get something that is more, going to bring you more value down the track. But what I want to hear is how you go about this.
Yeah. So this is the fun stuff.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of not giving them too many options.
Yep.
I think we're all guilty of saying, you could do this or you could do that. Setting some really strong parameters around them, because they're still, for all intents and purposes, children that need guidance, even if they are 16, 17. They don't have the capacity to make the right decisions straight up, even though we want to empower them to come up with the decisions themselves. So some of the things that I would suggest is taking them to a bank and getting them to open up a bank account and saying, we're going to split your pay each week into 3 separate accounts.
Okay.
Now, it's up to you to work out how you want them split, but they will be split. So, so not just giving them the option that money goes into their bank account and then they get their credit card or their debit card and they can spend it. But to be able to say, how much of your weekly wage are you going to transfer? And it happens automatically. So it might just be $10 a week, but it's better than nothing. And that goes into a rainy day savings. That's for their cars. That's for, when they need bond because they're going to move out. Like lots of different things. They might have presents in a charity. Some people like to do charity. I don't particularly, not at that age necessarily, because, we're trying to create wealth for themselves. And then one that's just spending. So if they get to the point and they really literally have nothing left for the week, they know they can't go and see a movie. And then if they get online and they transfer money into that account, they need to be really being specific about it. They're transferring it for a reason. So I would suggest that. Then there's other amazing things that you can do to start talking to them about getting excited about long-term savings and things. There's an app called Acorns, Acorns, Acorns. And what that does is that every time they spend money on their debit card, so they go and get a coffee for $4, it rounds it up to $5, and it puts that $1 into the share market for them.
Wow.
And they buy the top 200 on the ASX. It's absolutely brilliant. So it's a way that then they can log in online. They can see their share investments are growing. It's a very small form of dollar cost averaging into the market. They're buying little bit by little bit. It's a way that they don't have to save up $5,000 to get into the share market. It's a way that they're creating an investment for the longer term. So that's the first 2 things I do. Open up a bank account and say, this will be split into permanent savings and spending. How are we going to do it?
So you said, sorry to interrupt, I'm just trying to get it in my head because my kids have got a savings and a spending.
Yep.
So what are the 3 accounts?
Well, it's up to you. Some people have 4. I like the idea of 3. So I usually have one as a buffer. So I have one that my pay, or I would suggest for people to do. Your pay goes into one account. So when you're a grown up, we've got to allocate money out for mortgages and insurances and things like that. But when you're a kid, you don't really have all of that sort of stuff. So I would just say I like to have it split into 3. One that's your general one where your pay goes in, then it gets split into a savings account that you literally don't touch.
Yep.
That account then is something that they can talk to you about. Mum, I've got $1,000 there now. What do I do with it? Or when that, I'm saving for a car or, whatever it is. And then when one that's an interim account, the interim account can sometimes be things like I'm saving for Christmas. I'm saving up to go to Europe. It's an interim savings, something that's a buffer.
Yep.
And then they've got their general savings account that, money in, money out, and that will usually run down to 0 before they get paid again. So, and then that sometimes what I find is that people with that first one where the money's compulsorily put away, that doesn't grow a great deal because they usually don't allocate enough. The interim accounts sometimes can grow quite well because they'll just transfer more that they don't spend. So I've got 2 young girls that are 16. They're both friends' children's at the moment, and they're both saving to go to Europe. And so that second interim account is building quite well because if in their mind space as a teenager, saving for the longer term means nothing because they can't see the long term. So they just allocate $20 of their pay to go across to that, and it's neither here nor there. The one that's the interim, that's the buffer, that's the big Europe account. So for them, that's where they've got $60 in their account. They'll keep 20 because they need that for incidentals because they get paid in 3 days, and they transfer 40 across. Yeah. And they keep doing that, and that is building rapidly. Yeah. So, it's just encouraging them in a way that that suits them. Some kids are happy to get online and transfer money. Others just don't want to know about it. Head in the sand till they get to the ATM and see how much is left. The Acorn account is a really great way to do 2 things. One is it encourages education around investing. It starts to get that mindset of I'm putting my money to work. Yeah. So instead of me just working an hourly rate now, I'm working an hourly rate and my money's working for me as well. Yeah. It also creates a savings pattern for down the track when they're going to go for a mortgage or something like that. The banks are going to say, where's your savings history? And they'll say, well, I don't have one. Mm-hmm. Whereas if they've got a permanent savings history because they're directly putting money away and they've got an investment history, even if it is just $20 a month, over a period of 5 to 7 years, it shows consistency. Yeah. So, and that investment that can be accessed and redeemed whenever they want. Yeah. So if they did work on building that investment over time, and the 2 big drivers for wealth creation is always time. So time is the biggest factor, and compounding effects of interest over time. So starting a 17-year-old into an investment portfolio now, buying shares in the top 200 on the ASX will be absolutely gold in 20 years from now. So, so those sorts of things. So encouraging that mindset, encouraging them to think about starting to invest, and then just having the conversation and helping them do some figures over the kitchen table on, so this is how much you get in your pay each week. This is how much tax you'll be paying. This is why when you go and do more hours on school holidays and you're working all week, that all of a sudden, you've got more tax coming out of your wages. Yeah. Having that conversation around tax will also help them appreciate that they earn this much, but then the government needs this much. What do they need that for? Yeah. Well, that pays for roads, infrastructure, just starting to give them more of a holistic view on it's not just them getting their $17 an hour or whatever, or $14 an hour.
So to give a guide about what to put in the savings, the never touch account, do you talk about percentages, like take out a certain percent, or how do you kind of judge what to put in that?
Yeah, it depends on how much they're earning. Yeah. And it's really hard in year 11 and 12 because life is so expensive in Australia. We're the second most expensive country in the world to live. Yeah. And for their age group, everything costs so much money. Because you pay for it often. So, and they're also studying. So they can't get up enough hours in their working environment to also cover their lifestyle. So that's why it's often hard to allocate a portion. I like the idea of a minimum of 10%. Yep. I know for most people and most families across Australia, they can't save that. So what I try and encourage them is to just put more into the mortgages if they can, just round everything up. Yes, so you might not be able to save 10%, but you might be able to make 0.05% more repayments on your home loan. Yeah. Those sorts of things. And it's those little things that will add up over time.
Yeah. I know, I've spent the majority of my children's life as a single mum and there was no extra money, but I wanted to have something for them to when they leave school. And so what I've done is put their age in a savings account each week. So, it started really small, but it's not certainly not a great deal, but by the time they leave, they'll have enough to put towards, something, a car or a trip and it's amazing how that $5 a week or $6 a week or $10 a week, it's amazing how it adds up if you don't.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's absolutely brilliant tip. That's absolutely brilliant because it's the same as I do the same thing. My children are 8 and 9, and rather than give them larger pocket money,
Yep.
you know, there's jobs that they're expected to do around the house as just part of being in the family. They don't get paid for it. But if they go over and above, they get pocket money.
Yep.
And then what other people I know pay pocket money, I don't. I transfer money into an account for them, and then that just sits there and that will build, and they've both got their separate accounts, obviously still under my name, but it's there for them over time. And it's the same as I'd much rather, especially when they're little, I'd much rather spend less on a birthday present because, you know, these days with toys, you can get really inexpensive things, and put what I would have spent into their investment accounts or their savings accounts. Because, you know, at 4, they don't know how much you've spent on presents. And they get so much from grandparents and aunts and uncles and that sort of thing. So I know that both sets of grandparents are doing the same thing. Instead of spending $100 on a present, they might spend 50 and put the 50 away for them. So,
yeah, it's a great idea. It's amazing how just having these conversations, so many ideas pop up that you never thought of. It's, you know, there's so much power in just having these conversations with other mums, with your friends. What are you doing? And then, you know, we just get little ideas.
Yeah, totally. And sharing, because if you because sometimes we get so busy in our daily lives, we don't make time to allocate things like setting up an account to do this. And it literally takes 20 minutes. It's the same with going through your own financial affairs. You know, something that is very powerful for children to see is how their parents treat and respect money. You know, how do you talk about money around your children? Do you have a scarcity mindset? You're saying, oh, I can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Are you setting them up for that expectation that their life is going to be always around limiting beliefs around mindset? Sometimes that can be more damaging than anything else you can think of. You know, and also not something that I'm seeing quite frequently now is there's no delayed gratification in teenagers who are late. They want it now. They get it now. They don't have to work for it. There's no incentive or reward there. And then sometimes that doesn't allow problem solving. They can't, if they get something straight away, even if it's not material, they can't work to find a solution to make that happen because it just gets given to them. So then when problems arise in their life, they haven't got the proper coping or problem solving skills that they need in order to handle things. So deliberately giving them challenges that set them up to find solutions. I think, you know, I'm saying all of this as a mother of an 8 and 9-year-old. It would be totally different by the time mine are 18 and 19 and I'll be tearing my hair out, but trying to find ways to work to solutions, you know.
There's no secret. The earlier you set these things up, it's so much easier to implement them. You know, it's, you know, once you're trying to set new rules in place, once your kids turn 16, that's much harder to do.
Yeah. And look, we're all guilty of different things. I mean, mother's guilt is rife. You know, it's always about we never have enough work-life balance. And then coming from a woman who's a professional, and I struggle myself with trying to find the work-life balance. But we get guilty about everything. You know, we can better manage money ourselves. We can better look after our health ourselves. We can better look after our emotional wellness ourselves. So, but if your kids are seeing that when bills come in, you look at them, you talk about them, you find ways to reduce them or whatever. If they're seeing that, you know, you're celebrating your wins and your successes around wealth, around money, around your work, about setting targets, strategies for yourself, like even just your children knowing that you're, you know, saving for a holiday, or, you know, there's reasons why you're doing things. I think all of that then leads to them having this well-rounded, you know, view of it.
How do we change that scarcity? You know, because I'm just thinking about with my kids, I'm sure that I've been very guilty of that, just because of the way things have been while they were growing up. How do you change that language? It's not, you know, I'm just trying to think about it in practical terms, because, you know, they ask for things and it's like, well, we haven't got the money for that. And I hear them now saying, well, I wanted to ask you for that, Mum, but I didn't think we'd have the money. So it's, I just wonder how I change that now?
Yeah. No, well, look, people like Warren Buffett of the world, one of the world's richest men, he still lives in the same house he's always lived in. You know, he's not a spendthrift. So I think that it does come down to who you are fundamentally as a person. Some of the wealthiest people I've ever met, you would never know they had money because they didn't spend it. I think it's probably more around you can have that frugal personality and still want for more things. So being able to encourage them and to know that it's okay to want more for yourself. It's okay to want to be successful. Sometimes a scarcity mindset locks us into this belief that it's always just going to be this, and we want more for ourselves. It's like that that saying that says, you know, who are you not to shine? Who are you not to be the greatest that you can be? And we're scared of how amazing we could be rather than, you know, anything else. So I don't know how to get out of the scarcity mindset specifically, but I know tangibly the actions that create the results, because a lot of us have that negative self-talk that goes round. And I've had to face that the last 10 years specifically, because who am I if I wasn't wealthy? You know, you're having to change that specifically. Decluttering sounds lame, but that really works. So if you don't know where else to start in your life right now, you know, you've got 40, 50 years worth of ingrained bad habits, which we all have, and you don't know where to start or what to change, just declutter. Just go, you think, I'm going to have Jodie come over here this afternoon. She's going to want to go through my office. Oh, am I going to be proud of this? Can I put my hands on my super statements? Can I put my hands on the last rates notice? Like, is everything organized, or is it all just thrown into the top drawer of the kitchen cupboard? You know, just that sort of just declutter, start making space to allow new things in, because just that process does a lot of things. It cleans up a lot of messy ends. It makes you more aware. You're being more respectful. Little things like, you know, how your wallet looks, how the money's organized, just silly little things that you start appreciating. When you do have money to pay for a bill, then you say, I'm really grateful that that's there. And you know, it's that whole law of attraction thing, although that can be quite woo-woo.
Well,
I
agree with it. I mean, I see it in action. So
well, and I feel the same way. Anecdotally, I see it. So if people are coming to me and they're saying, we're at our wit's end, we don't know what else to do, we're not sleeping at night, we're sick in the guts, all this stuff's happening, where do we start? The first thing I'll say, where's your office? Where's your money zones in your house? Let's start decluttering them. You know, I'm bringing in plants and making everything lovely for them, so that so we're just starting to create a different energy around their money environment. Then we start going through bank accounts. And if you can measure something, you can manage it. So people who are stressed around money quite often don't know where it goes. It takes in and then woof, it's gone out into all these bills, and then there's nothing left for other bills. So we need to start going, okay, well, money's going to come into here, and then from there, what we're going to do is do this, and do yourself a budget. Something that's crazily exciting for kids is to see the graphs that you can get online at any bank, is to say, okay, well, if I start putting $20 a week away, how's that going to look in 2 years' time when I finish uni, or 3 years' time? How much am I going to have? That's going to be my Europe holiday. So they see the purpose for which they're saving. And I think we're all like that. If you can see the results, you're more likely to stick with something. And money's absolutely no different. One of the biggest things around, having done this for 25 years, is money has an energy all of its own. Wealth has its own energy. Like money, wealth, finances, and people give it an energy. They attach this scarcity, hard set, it's all too hard, I'm no good at it. And they have this conversation with themselves around money. If you do nothing else but declutter and start to respect how it's working for you in your world, and stop that negative self-talk or energy that you give money, every time you hear yourself say something, just stop. You don't have to try and replace it with anything, just stop that. And then you'll be blown away at just the results that will do.
fantastic. I love that idea. I love that idea. So if we think about gorgeous teenage girls as, you know, brand new little sponges, what's the information that we want them to be soaking up? How do we come up with maybe, I think I saw that you had, was it 5 actions to take now to get immediate result? Can you just kind of, if we can give mums to take away from this interview, you know, like 5 things that they can talk about with their girls now, and perhaps, you know, for many of us, it's actually starting to do it ourselves as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I love the idea of creating a tribe of motivational women around your daughters.
Yes.
You know, exposing them to women who you respect and you admire, but not just in a friend capacity, but in a learned environment. So I love nothing better than sitting and having a conversation with a 16-year-old woman about what's happening in her world. How does she feel about that? You know, because I'm not her mum. So she can normally talk to me about, and then because I am in a professional corporate finance world, I start to say, well, what about this? Have you thought about that? What about your traineeship? How do you, and I want them to start thinking, and I want to encourage them and support. So if you've got women in your world, and I'm especially conscious of this with my 2, trying to make sure that I have, you know, that's that saying, the sum of the 5 people they hang around most. You know, sometimes they get so caught up with their friends. There's a whole nother world outside their little circle. So giving them mentors, you know, the people like, I'm lucky because I've got the Kims and the Cindys of the world where they embrace my 2 and all of that. So showing them that the career paths are there, talking to them about the energy around money. They really resonate with that. Quite often they know themselves. They feel like they're purposeful. They feel like the world's their oyster. It can be overwhelming for them. So just to talk to them, decluttering, you know, I love the idea of creating people around them that are supportive and encouraging, and mentor type environment. Setting up the structure, giving them a structure. This is how your money's going to come in. This is how it works well. This is what we know works. Being a little bit more certain about that so that they're not having options, because sometimes when they have options, they'll take the easiest path. And the easiest path isn't always the best thing for them. So then the decluttering, like I said, probably the Acorns investments, you know, getting them excited about, okay, well, when you buy a coffee for $4.85, 15 cents is going to automatically happen to here. And even if you have to set it up and log on and show them how it's all going to work, and then they'll be able to graph that and see how that's moving for themselves. I like the idea of setting them up with little asset and liability, you know, money in versus money out. You know, they've got, well, I've got my TV and I've got my, you know, bed, and I've got my, you know, their little assets. It might not be a house, but they've got bits and pieces. You know, I've got jewelry, or I've got whatever, a car, just so that you're starting the conversation. They're probably the key things straight away that I would say to be encouraging them around the conversations.
The Acorn account, is that something that has to be set up by somebody over 18? So mum set it up and then the girls use it, or can they set it up themselves? Is it?
I think they have to be 18 plus. Yeah. Because it is an investment. But I might actually only be 16. I'd have to double check that. I haven't looked into it, to be honest.
We can have a look at that.
Yeah. But it's, you know, it's one of those things that it's just it's fairly new. It's been around a few years, but it works well. It's a way that people can get into the markets without having to spend a fortune or save heaps first, because it creates no real incentive to save. Especially when you're getting 3% in the bank, you know, sort of doesn't seem purposeful. And if you've got debts and credit cards and things like that, and just on that conversation, one of the worst things that you can do is to allow them to have a credit card with a limit that they can't control. And quite often they'll sneak and get other credit cards, and they'll have other lines of credit. I'm seeing so many 20 pluses in my office who are, you know, $60,000, $70,000 in debt, private debt, personal debt, that they can't, it's almost impossible to get out of, because they've got.
How do they get the cards, Jodie?
At 18.
Oh, at 18.
Interest, yeah, at interest, the interest-free, interest only. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Oh,
and then if you get couples together, then they can't pay their rent. They, it's insurmountable. There's a lot of places that you can go, which you're not aware until you look into it. Places where you can pay off your bond. So kids move out of home, they pay the bond for them. The interest on that's massive. Then they get the TVs and the washing machines, and they put it all on interest free. Next thing you know, they've got $8,000 worth of debt. Then they get a car loan. There's another 25, 30,000. It is a real problem.
Gosh, what a terrible way to launch yourself into life with that sort of.
Yeah, I mean, you can work through it. It's not impossible. So if people are sitting there with children who, are 20 and they've got massive credit card debt or whatever, it is possible to work through it. But it's just encouraging them not to go down that way first. And if you've got an opportunity to talk, what's bad debt, what's good debt, investment debt, all of that sort of stuff. And sometimes we are guilty of dumbing things down for them, thinking that they're not capable of understanding.
Yep.
But I'm always blown away at the caliber of how much they want to learn and how much they comprehend if you can explain it.
That's fantastic. I just, I'm in my head, I'm thinking about the university debt that comes on top of all that other stuff as well. It's about some sort of financial awareness around managing our money. It's they're potentially digging themselves into a pit that can last for a long time.
Yeah, yes and no. I don't know. I love uni. I didn't go to uni myself. I studied externally while I worked full time, which was hard. But I think if they go and do a course for the sake of doing a uni course that's going to cost them $30,000 and they come out with nothing, that's disappointing. But if they've got direction and goals and they know that they sort of the university does a few things, but one of the biggest things that I love that uni does for kids that age is it allows them to critically think. It gives them the skills to question.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest difference between university and non-university I see in kids is the ability to critically think and critically evaluate.
Yeah.
But, again, everybody's different. The idea of just going for 4 years to party with your friends and end up with a big HECS debt and no job.
I think it's, the way things have gone now, it's particularly in Australia, it's just, you'd be mad to do that. The cost of university now, it's very different to when we were going through, or, from our age group. So I've got such a long list of questions and I just got so drawn into everything that you're talking about. It's fantastic. So, one of the big things on my list was how do we talk about money in front of kids, and we've sort of looked at that and empowering them around money. So the actions that create immediate results. So you were talking about, when they've got little bits coming in, how we can show them, how to get that, that immediate result is going to impact them so much more because of that, that desire to see something now. So the steps that we were looking at to support that were those accounts.
Yeah. I think I think having an account where it's split automatically, you take the hard work out of it for them, and you help them cement the decision on how much they're going to transfer to each one. That's done. The idea that they're creating an investment account, they'll be able to brag about that with their friends.
Yeah.
And at that age, everything is about what am I doing? That it's just something that makes them look savvier in front of their friends, but it also is something that's creating something for their future going forward.
Yeah.
They need to know why they're doing things, and we're all the same. If I have clients in front of me and I say, you need to pay down more on your home loan, why? Like what? Because we want to pay off sooner, but why? Why are we paying it off sooner? Because we need to get investment property. Why do we get investment property? Like we need to have a strategy about why they're doing things and give them time frames. Because 2 years to a 16-year-old is like
a lifetime.
Yeah. Whereas if they have a savings goal between now and Christmas,
Yeah.
They're allocating $50 a week because at Christmas time, you're going to contribute another amount of money, and that's their tickets to Europe. You know, all of a sudden they've got a savings plan, they've got a goal, they've got an outcome. You know, you're supporting it by doing something else. And just being really tangible around setting goals and targets, because that set them in beautiful stead for when they're on their own.
Yeah.
And they know they want to do this, but they don't know the steps to get there. So I think our job is to go, okay, so you want to go to Europe, say, when you're 18, and we need $2,500 in airfares, and you're going to need another $1,000 in. So we need this much money. Work back from there to here. How much do we need to save to get to there? And then when you reach that goal, I'm going to contribute this much here because I'm going to be so proud of you and I want to see you have this amazing experience. Yeah. But you need to be committed to doing these. And then by just doing that, you're helping them problem solve. You're helping them to achieve a goal, which when they set their next goal, they'll know how to set the targets, because otherwise it's just they don't ever set goals and hit targets. And that's as true for their personal life as it will be for their work environment. You know, people want to get an investment property. People want to be debt free. People want to have amazing superannuation. They just don't know how to step it through because they've never been taught. And then once you teach them once or twice, it's a skill that they'll have forever.
They learn. So I know there was something on my mind that I wanted to ask you, and that's I'm thinking about my eldest son who's 18 and he works. He's doing year 12, and he also has a job, and he works really hard to make money. But I wanted to ask you about how to talk to him about cash versus assets, because he's a very passionate bike rider, and so he'll save and save and save and buy a $3,000 push bike, which I'm flabbergasted that he's able to do it, but then he's back to zero cash. But he's got an asset that's worth that much that he can turn around and sell. What's the is that okay to just say that's great and keep going with it, or should he, how do I talk to him about doing that sensibly? Is that
so that's a really good question. The first thing that comes to mind is, how proud would I be if that was my son?
Yeah. Oh, I'm proud.
because he never went out and put that $3,500 on credit.
Yeah.
So I'm blown away already. I think that's amazing. The second thing is, no cash flow is hard for you because you think, oh, why couldn't you just wait another couple of months and then you'd still have a little bit of cash, and then but the mentality is he's hit his target.
Yeah.
He's got the money there to buy the bike. If he has to eat nothing for the next 3 weeks, it probably does, he probably doesn't care because of the elation and the gratitude and the excitement of hitting his target. So I would keep encouraging that. And while he's got you to fall back on because you'll feed him and house him, I think that just keep doing what you're doing. The fact that you've instilled that side of saving for an outcome is a really strong skill set that you can't just easily teach. So I wouldn't worry too much about his negative cash flow at the moment. He'll work that out down the track when he's got bills he needs to pay, and as he gets a bit older. I'd be celebrating his wins on hitting such epic milestones.
He's just got that mindset, but what concerns me is he looks at it and then he goes, he's happy with it for about 5 minutes, and then he's thinking about how he's going to get the next better one. So
yeah, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
As much as we don't like to hear that as parents, that's an entrepreneurial spirit. So I'd be starting to harness that into, because and I'm only saying that because I resonate with that, and a lot of the people I know who, it's a fine line between never being happy and celebrating your wins to always striving to achieve the next thing.
Yeah.
And we're all different, but I like the idea that he's a self-starter and he's driven. And if he hits that thing, and then he's and at 18, and he's like, okay, now what? I would be encouraging that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I do, and I'm enormously proud of him. But I do I do get him to really want him to stop and be grateful for what he has now, rather than never quite get it. It's always got to be the next thing. And he's, that's just the way he's wired. But I'll need to send him up to spend some time with you.
Yeah, well, sadly, that's something I've had to work on my whole life.
Yeah,
it's great for what we have. But I think the older you get too, that comes naturally. And it's not until you've experienced massive loss that then you really become grateful. You know, I hear from a lot of my clients who are older than me talk about health. You know, they've always taken health for granted, and it's not until you don't have good health that all of a sudden that's the only thing that matters. So, yeah, and I mean, he's got you as a mum, and I know what you're like. So he's going to naturally have all that beautifulness and that gratitude and all of that sort of stuff. But that drive and the ambition and that sort of stuff's very hard to teach. So, yeah, I think it's good. He'll naturally get the gratitude thing as he gets older.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken about it before, but being the daggy mum that I am, I gave them all gratitude journals for Christmas. I can say, write that bike in your gratitude journal.
Oh, see, that's awesome. My mum used to have affirmations everywhere. She's a lawyer, but she's also a Reiki master. So I grew up with all the energy, understanding how that works. And she used to have, I love and approve of myself exactly as I am, on little cards stuck to the fridge, in the bathroom, you know, everywhere you opened the cupboard, there was this, I love and approve of myself exactly as I am. Yeah. And so I do the same. I've got little affirmations all over my house, and people come over and they're like, this is very strange. But the kids see it, you know, and if they're constantly reinforcing themselves that, you know, they're really good, you know, they're capable, they're loved, you know, those things I think resonate as you're growing up. So I love it. I think what you're doing is amazing.
Oh, well, I think you're amazing. I know you've got a free gift for our mums. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Basically, it's just the basics on teaching your kids about money. So it's just a little ebook which just explains the things that you could possibly do at the different age groups in encouraging a really good relationship between money and how your children are learning about it. So yeah, so like for instance, my daughter, when she was little, she would hear the All Ords on the TV at night with the news and hear that it's up and know that made mummy happy. The All Ords is up, mummy, the All Ords is up. And she'd run around. She has no clue what that meant. But it was just instilling that really good positive mindset around money and starting the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being with us, Jodie. I know that this is just going to be gold for the mums out there. And thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye for now.